As I remember last week, I talked a lot about the struggle to leave my family, to meet my present wife, and to create a step family. And I'm now ready to turn back to what was the organizing topic that led me into all of this. It was my feelings about myself as a father and the experiences I've had as a father. And I had previously in other episodes gone through my struggles raising a very handicapped child and then raising another second adopted child. And now I'm into my step family, and I will talk about my experiences with my two stepdaughters. Uh, they were about 8 and 6 when I came to live with them. I think I mentioned that. And I will focus today on what it was like raising Amy, the older of the two. Uh, Amy was always very expressive and very artistic. Uh, she was very willing to speak up on her own behalf. She was an energetic child, and she she was a passionate child. She felt things intensely. She felt her hatreds intensely. She felt her sadnesses intensely. She felt her joy intensely. She was really something. The first thing I noticed as I stepped into the two of them, though, and having to be with the two of them, is they were 14 months apart. I think I've commented on this some. So that made them in each other's way all the time. And they shared a common bedroom. They had twin beds and they had one little black and white television set. And the bickering was constant between the two of them. You can shake your head yes or no. Did I tell the story about how I separated them previously? I did about that's right. I had them choose who was going to go into the screen porch that had been turned into a kind of little add-on room and get the color television to manage, and the younger child elected to be there. So that was the first good step into making a better step family. The bickering between the two of them subsided substantially after that. Uh, what was also apparent to me was that their separated father, who was turning out to be a very difficult person for all of us, was clearly much more bonded with Amy, the older one, than he was with Karen, the younger one. And he would frequently take her off for little adventures and leave her. And I believe my younger child, and well, this will come up on more when I talk about her, felt that she was not as special to her father as her older sister was. And I think she wasn't as special to her father as her older sister was. Uh, where am I going? I'm fast forwarding. Did anything? Oh, uh, yes, this stands out because Amy was very artistic, uh, and my wife had been a fine arts major for the first 2 years of her undergraduate education. Art was very important in that family that I was joining. And my wife got very, very annoyed. She had put Amy was the first one to go to public school, and she put her in kindergarten in the neighborhood public school. And they did a lot of drawing and painting. And she went one day and to have a teachers conference. And she herself had been an elementary school teacher before she had retired to have children and be a stay-at-home mom for as long as she could, and was about to go back to teaching, as a matter of fact. And the kindergarten teacher was very upset and said that my stepdaughter Amy was refusing to learn how to draw trees. And my wife was very confused. She's refusing to learn how to draw trees. So the teacher said, here's what I do. And she brought in a drawing of a tree that the teacher had made. And she said, I show this to the children and I want them to copy this. And when Amy draws a tree, she draws a tree that looks very different than this. She just won't learn how to draw a tree. And my wife said, I don't agree with you. She's seen many trees. She draws all kinds of trees. When she's at home, they're all different. She doesn't have a stereotype tree that she wants to learn how to draw. And she came home and said, I can't keep Amy in that school. That's not the school for Amy. And we went over our budget. She said, I'm going to find a private school to transfer in that values creativity and allows children to express themselves. So we enrolled the girl in Westland, which was a wonderful, wonderful school up on Mulholland Drive. And that place had been founded by the Hollywood 10. Uh, Charlie Chaplin was one of the founding parents who brought Westland School into creation. And it was a wonderful learn by doing school. And there were no tests and no grades of any kind. And uh, well, that's a whole other topic. I won't get into what I think is good education for children at this point. But Amy was the pioneer who started us down the path of thinking more creatively about what's a good education for a growing mind. Also, it was very apparent to me that school and she was identifying with her mother. School, schooling, teaching were very important activities. Her favorite recreation when she had unbounded play was to gather her stuffed animals around, and she became the school teacher, and they were her pupils, and she would be teaching school. That was her recreation. And it was particularly exciting to watch because she was getting really good inspiring school teachers at the private school she was going to. And she loved being a teacher. Uh, Fast forward, uh, she was now about 10 years old. And Hermine and I had decisions about preparing children for their future. And we decided that we were not going to do the neglect and silence that was inflicted on us. So I remember that it was very important. Both Hermine and I sat down with her and talked to her about the fact that menstruation would probably be coming in the next year or two, and to explain what it was and what it was all about, and to get her ready and to give her her own stash of various kinds of supplies that would be in a special cupboard in her room for her when she needed them. And if she wanted to tell us that it started and wanted to celebrate or complain or whatever she wanted to do, it was fine. If she wanted to just take care of this in her own privacy, that was fine too. And no, she wanted to talk to us about it when it happened, and she was feeling proud. She was feeling like she was growing up. We did the same thing when she was about 13, I think, about oncoming sexuality. And both of us sat down with her again, and we started to talk to her about how her body was changing. She was growing breasts, she was menstruating, and soon she would start having various kinds of sexual arousal feelings in her. And she would probably start touching her body and exploring her body. And that was part of growing up. And one day beyond that, she would start interacting with boys, and she would probably start experimenting with sex before she ever got married. We were not big subscribers to the social conventions in some of our culture that you should have no sex until you're married, and that sex was only a part of marriage. We believe the statistics that most young people, by the time they enter college, a majority of them already have had some kinds of sexual experiences. So she didn't have to discuss that with us at all. It was gonna, if she wanted to keep her own privacy and her own sense of adventure, that was fine. If she encountered anything she wanted to talk to us about, that was fine too. We taught her about birth control, the various kinds, that there were diaphragms, there were gels that she could put in herself, there were pills she could go on, and we were not going to tell her what she should do or when she should start. We only wanted her to know we had already told her pediatrician that when she was interested in beginning to do something for birth control, the pediatrician had our permission. We had signed a paper giving her permission that she could talk directly to Amy and she didn't have to tell us or do anything. Amy was free to start that whenever she wanted to on her own. So those two things, a few years after I came to live with Amy, were very much on my mind. I then began to institute, Hermine and I, both of us agreed, we needed to try and begin to teach them to be responsible members of the household. So we began to find chores for them to do, and they became their responsibility. Setting the table, clearing the table, putting clothes in a hamper, running the washing machine occasionally, taking out trash. We had a list of various kinds of things that each was expected to do. And I am telling you, we had no trouble. There was a willingness to participate. They knew the family meals were important. We were to spend at least an hour together every evening at the dinner table, and we would have conversation and talk to each other. They weren't to get up and go check their phones. The phone, we only had an answering machine then. Dinner was to be uninterrupted. They weren't to start doing their homework or gazing off in the distance. And that we would eat at the dinner table. That modified over the years as they got busier and busier with their peer group, but that comes later. Uh, During elementary school years, I cannot remember a single thing that was troublesome, except bickering between the two of them occasionally. And you can't expect siblings to be in the same house without some bickering, some teasing, some bitchiness. And it was not excessive and it stopped quite quickly. What was the next kind of landmark that came up? Oh, well, when Amy was 11, 12, her father moved to Northern California. He continued to practice law. He married his secretary by that time and decided to live in Northern California. He went all the way up to Eureka because that was becoming the marijuana growing underground center of the state. And a lot of litigation work had been representing people who were dealing in marijuana. And he figured he could make his career happen best up in Eureka, California. Whoops, I lost you for a second. Okay, you came back on. And he had left. So they began to see each other very, very infrequently. He dropped out of their life. We had a really obnoxious time with him because he became very flaky about paying child support. We could never count on it. It was never on time. It came chaotically. For the first few years of our new relationship with each other and the new family we created, we were taking him to court periodically on contempt of court actions because he was in violation of the rules. On one occasion, the judge said he was sick and tired of seeing him in the courtroom, and if he didn't pay us promptly, he was going to go to jail for a weekend. So that scared him, and he borrowed the money from his father to pay us off. But it was so aggravating all the time. And then there were attorney's fees for dragging him into court and filing the papers. It was such obnoxious, terrible thing to go through. So I'm creative. I like solving problems. I said to Hermine, look, are we going to do this every 3 or 4 months until each child is 18? This is a horrible way to live. Let us make an assumption. Let us make an assumption that he's going to give us zero money and that we're on the hook. We're going to have to support, not only send child support from my former children to my former wife, but we're going to have to be fully responsible for them. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to make a proposal to him. He doesn't have to give us a penny. We waive the payment of child support. We don't waive the support. It can accumulate. If things get better for him, We'll ask him put the money in a savings account instead of sending it to us. We'll expect nothing from him. And on each one's 18th birthday, he will owe us the full total of what was accruing over all those months when he wasn't giving us any child support. And I figured out what the figures were. And I said, for Amy, she'll turn 18 before Karen. Your sum net is, I think, forgot what it was, 18,000 something he was going to owe us on her 18th birthday, and it would be 20,000 something on Karen's 18th birthday. And I said, he's not going to pay us. This is horseshit. He'll tell us he's tapped out or give us the same excuses then. But we only have to take him to court once on that occasion, and we'll find out what the judge does with this debt. We won't have to be aggravated every few months from now until they finish growing up. I thought that was very creative. I didn't know if he would sign the agreement, but much to my surprise, he signed it. He jumped on it, was happy to be relieved of the responsibility of having to pay us every month until each one turned 18. Now, I will tell you, wonder of wonder, I'll jump ahead to Amy's 18th birthday. In the interim, both his parents died, and he came into an inheritance. So it was not a big deal for him to write the check for Amy's money, and he did send us the money 3 days after her 18th birthday. God bless him. So that one turned out to be a brilliant solution to a challenging problem. The other, she was our experimental child because she was the oldest too. She was reaching landmarks sooner than her sister was. Let's see, which came first? Oh, a backpacking trip. I think she was about 15 then, and Karen must have been 13. We started backpacking. I went myself. I had started backpacking before I met them. And slowly we became a backpacking family. Hermine was not that excited about backpacking, but the kids loved it. And we had two friends who had kids about the age of our kids too. So it was often three families who would go backpacking together. And I remember, let's see, one of the families had two male children and a female about the same age as our kids, our two-step kids, and the other family only had one girl. So one night, we the adults had had enough, and were going to hit the sleeping bags. We had a nice campfire roaring, and the kids said, we're going to stay up for a while and talk to each other. So fine, they were in early adolescence, all the middle adolescents, and we started to go to sleep. And I could see them far away through the distance where the fire was. Our sleeping bags were maybe several hundred yards from where 100 yards. No, it wasn't. Maybe 50, 75 yards from where the fire was going. But I could see through the kids' trees that they were doing something. They were circling around and coming back. And I said, I'm going to go see what they're doing over there. And I got out of my sleeping bag and I crawled very quietly to spy on them. And they were playing kissing games. That's what they were doing. So I came back and said, it's starting. It's going to get wilder. They're still young. I don't know what's going to happen 2, 3 years from now. They probably are not going to want to come here with us. They'll be happy to be on their own when we're not around. And they can have the house to themselves. I don't know. Their sexuality is blossoming. I mean, I gave a report. I remember that experience. Fast forward to Amy's 16th birthday. Hermine and I asked her what she wanted to do. She had a list of people she wanted to come for her 16th birthday. Oh, it was happening already by then. A big change had taken place in their life. We had gotten out of that tiny house that we lived in when I first went to live with them about 4 years later. So when Amy was 12, we had already moved. And they had a unique living experience that we provided for them. At that time, I was leaving the group practice I had been on. Uh, I was spending a lot of time at the California School of Professional Psychology already, taking on administrative responsibilities. I was only in practice part-time, and I was wondering, could we find a house to live in that was a duplex or was 3 apartments or something like that? So Hermine could have an office and I could have an office, and the rest of it would be our residence. And sure enough, we found a wonderful, wonderful, very spacious duplex. The down payment back then was $50,000. We got that money out of Hermine's old house, and we put the down payment down. And what did we have? We had 2 units, one on top of each other with an internal staircase between the 2 of them, as well as a front door to the street. When you came in off the street, there was 2 stairways, one that went to an upstairs door that was often locked with an apartment number on it, B, and one to the downstairs door just to the left that led into another apartment that was A. They were on top of each other and they were identical. There was a living room, there was a full dining room, there were 3 bedrooms, a full kitchen, a service porch, and 2 bathrooms in each unit. It was wonderful. So the bedrooms were towards the back, and the other rooms were towards the front on the street. The upstairs house became our offices. We used the living room for whole group therapy in the living room. The dining room was our dining room to entertain guests when we socialized with our own friends, our own peers. The kitchen was used for preparing meals for when we had company in. The first bedroom closest to the front door was the waiting room that people went into when they were waiting. There was a bathroom right next door to it, so that was fine. The 2 back bedrooms, one was my office and one was Hermine's office. I was in heaven. That was a wonderful place to have an office. It was a congested area. Nobody was paying attention to whether we were violating the license zoning laws or not. There was plenty of street parking, plenty of people coming and going, because all the other buildings on 3 blocks north of Wilshire Boulevard, there were apartment buildings. There were multiple places where people came and went. So I love living there. And the kids were in heaven. We told them the downstairs house was their house. So the living room was their living room. The dining room we turned into a recreation room. There were computers in it and some games in it. And the kitchen was their kitchen to experiment with learning how to cook in. They had an extra bedroom where once in a while we went away. So if somebody came to take care of them, the help could live in there. The other 2 bedrooms were their bedrooms. When it wasn't a babysitter of any kind, they could invite a friend over, and a friend could stay the night and have a bedroom there. It was wonderful. They loved it. Family dinners were downstairs in the downstairs kitchen because it had a breakfast room attached. That's where we all had our family meals, and Hermine would go downstairs and cook downstairs with the help of the children. But at the end of the downstairs meal, we would excuse ourselves, go upstairs, close the door of our apartment, and we could be young newlyweds in our own apartment without them. And I put in an intercom system. So if they needed attention or needed to talk to us about anything, they could buzz us on the intercom. And they loved being without us, and we loved being without them. Once in a while, we would hear them squabbling. I would go downstairs and tell them if they were going to squabble and bicker, they had to do it so quietly that we didn't hear them. If they were going to kill, if one of them was going to kill the other, they had to do it without screaming, and we didn't want to know anything about it. And they would get into terrible trouble if they kept making noise. We didn't care about the bickering, but we cared about the noise. Uh, At any rate, there was another gift coming. In addition to the gift of having their own quarters to live in and their own place to experiment with social relations, with cooking, and with all kinds of things, we gave Amy a gift she didn't even know about on her 16th birthday. Hermina and I decided that we would bite our tongues. We would, it was in several parts. One part was we would bite our tongues and we would never again give any unsolicited advice. We wouldn't comment on her appearance or what she should wear or what homework she should do or what courses she should sign up for in school or what major she should take or no unsolicited advice. We would not stop giving advice, but only if she asked for some. We trusted the world and her interactions with the world to teach her the lessons she needed to learn. And I made a prediction she would not have to rebel because there was nothing we were demanding of her anymore. We had turned it over to her. In addition, there was no further curfew, no sleep time. She could come and go in the house when she pleased. We asked only for one thing because there were no cell phones back then or location devices. If she went somewhere, she would post a note where she was headed for. She didn't even have to stay there. If she went to person A's house for the evening and they were studying and they decided to move on to person's B's house and maybe stay overnight there, all she had to do was call the answering machine and update the notification about how to get in touch with her. We said, if the house starts burning, if there's a crisis here of some kind, we want to be able to get in touch with you. So that's all we need to know. And she starts yelling, "You're trying to control me." I said, "No, you're not listening. You can come and go as you please. You don't need our permission anymore. You can stay out all night. You can do whatever you want with your homework. Fail classes if you want to, if that's on your mind. Do whatever you want. But we only want to know how to get in touch with you. That's the only requirement we have. And of course, we're not abandoning you. If you have a dilemma, you want our advice, you want to tell us about it, we'll drop everything and be there in a moment. But you're now in partial, if not complete responsibility for your own life. We figured to give that to you 2 years before you might leave home and will certainly be on your own, and you won't have us to watch over your shoulder all the time. So we want to see you learning to manage all that before you leave home. And now's the time to start learning. We think you might make some mistakes. You might make some messes. That's okay. You're entitled to. We're not going to scold you. We don't need you to be perfect. But learn. You need to learn time management. You need to learn to juggle schoolwork, sleep, and your health and your relationship with your friends and recreation and solitude. You need to learn how to manage the right amounts and move from one to the other. So that was the next thing that got turned over to her. Once there was trouble. She went with some friends. The hell? There was a brewery in the San Fernando Valley. I forgot which one. Budweiser. I think there was a Budweiser brewery, and it had a theme park connected with it. So when she went to somebody's house, the parents were going to take the teenagers and drop them off at that recreation center, and then pick them up later in the night. So that happened, and then the parents who were going to pick them up had car trouble and couldn't get them and were waiting for the car to get repaired. And we finally got a call from a payphone late in the night, about 2 o'clock in the morning. The kids were way out in the far San Fernando Valley, and we were unhappy. We're unhappy about being awakened. We were unhappy that there was no contingency plan. And sullenly, I went and picked them up and I said, I hope this was a good learning experience. Some parts of this did not get managed well. And I don't like getting up at 2 o'clock in the morning to come fetch you, but you're not safe being on the streets in this neighborhood at this hour. And so I'm doing it grudgingly. That was the only time that there was any kind of problem. She managed very well in between. Her I cannot tell you when she began to experiment fully with her sexuality. She never discussed any of it with us, and we never inquired at all. I do know when she was 17, when she finished her wonderful elementary school, we made a next decision. It was very costly to send the kids there. And it wasn't the real world. They were with high achieving, talented kids only. And we thought it was time for them to absorb the real world. So we put them first into John Burroughs Junior High, which was the junior high closest to where we were living. And then they went to Fairfax High School. And they were with gangs, and they were with black kids being bussed in, and they were with druggies, and they had to learn to swim their way through all of this. They did fine. They got good grades. They excelled. They didn't get into any trouble. They never had any interest in drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, trying marijuana. We never forbade it, and they never had any interest in it, strangely enough. It wasn't this, we would offer them some wine. We were drinking wine at dinner. If they wanted to have a sip of my beer, I gave it to them. They wanted to taste my martini, I gave it to them. They had no interest in alcohol. It wasn't forbidden fruit that was reserved only for adults. But I could tell Amy was getting increasingly involved with the young man. And she got very involved with somebody I will call Brad. I will protect the guilty. Uh, how did she meet Brad? She signed up for an activity, an after school activity that I thought was ridiculous, but she wanted to do it. I don't know who talked her into it. She wanted to be a flag girl in the marching band. So after school, she would practice for a while, took time away from her studying, but her grades never suffered. So she loved twirling the flag and marching with the band. And one of the trumpet players in the band was named Brad, and he took a liking to her. And after a while, Brad started showing up at our house. She would invite him over. She would ask if he could stay for dinner. And I don't know. The chemistry was bad. I didn't enjoy Brad particularly. I was confused about why she was attracted to him. I had no idea. My wife was confused about why she was attracted to him, but I was welcoming. He was welcome to stay for dinner if she wanted him invited for dinner. If we were going to the movies on a weekend and she wanted to bring Brad along, we treated Brad to the movies. Uh, I remember taking him on a vacation once with us. Brad came along. Now it gets interesting. Brad's ambition, he was not going to go to college. His ambition was he had several other musicians that he practiced with. He was going to put together a rock band and they were going to become rich and famous. That's what Brad wanted to do with his life. He didn't work at all. He lived with his parents, not in his parents' house. There was a little guest house on the property behind where his parents lived in South Pasadena. They weren't very wealthy, but they had a house with a little guest house. So Brad lived in the guest house, and that's where he and his band practiced. And they kept trying to get little volunteer gigs playing in various places. His parents paid. He didn't have to pay any rent. His parents fed him. We fed him frequently, and he had practically no expenses. I guess his parents still gave him spending money, but Amy was very responsible. She went off to college when she was 18, and she got a part-time job. What was she doing? She was waiting tables, and she was using her salary to treat Brad to things. She would go over to his place increasingly and cook for him. And sometime during her 18th year, she said, I'm going to Cal State LA. That's where I'm an art major. And I think I should move to South Pasadena. I'm going to go live with Brad because I won't have such a terrible commute as I have every day. And I said, you're 18, you can make your own decisions. Go live with Brad. So she started living with Brad, and we would see her once a week. There were no laundromat facilities on the parents' property, so she would bring her clothes and Brad's clothes to wash in our washing machines and dryer, and we would have dinner with her. And I was so irritated. This went on, and I said to Hermine, I made a commitment. I was not going to give her unsolicited advice, but she's being exploited, for Christ's sake. She takes care of him. She cooks for him. She makes his bed. She cleans his little space that he's in. She does everything for him. She takes his car, his old wreck of a car, and she has it serviced, and she pays the bills. And she's like a third parent who's watching over him. I don't. He must be a really wonderful fuck. I don't know what's going on. She puts up with all that. And I'm heartsick. And Hermine said she was too. And I said, I think I have to break my oath. I don't know. I'm going to talk to her once, and I'm going to apologize to her that I'm breaking a sacred oath. But I'm just so upset. I can't contain it anymore. And I'll tell you what I said to her. I described in effect what I was going to do. So the next time she came to do the wash, I said, are you in a hurry to get home? And she said, no, I have some time this evening. She said, while the washing machine is running and while you're folding clothes, don't rush away. I need at least 10 minutes to talk to you. I said, you may want to answer. I'm going to say some things to you. You don't have to answer me. You don't have to even act like you listen to me, but I just have to get this off my chest. And she said, okay. So we went into the living room where we were, where that place. And I said, uh, I am troubled about your relationship with Brad. And she started interrupting me. I said, no, please just listen to me. I'm not going to interfere in your relationship with Brad. He's always welcome here. But I want to tell you what I see. I see you working very hard at this relationship. You're very kind to him. You're very devoted. You're very sweet. You're very caretaking. You provide for him, you cook for him, you market for him, you get his car service for him, you clean for him, you do his laundry for him. You're doing that right now. And for the life of me, I don't see what you get out of it. When he's here, he doesn't act particularly caretaking towards you. And I have to tell you, your sister has been a fink. She talked about him, and I know behind his back, he calls us spoiled upper class people with terrible values, and he sneers at us. He comes and exploits us too. He's very happy to take our meals and our vacations and go to movies and things with us, but he sneers with contempt at us behind our backs, and that certainly doesn't feel good. I'm unhappy if you're seriously involved with somebody who thinks your parents are awful people. I don't think we're awful people, and I don't think we deserve his scorn. I can't understand why he's so contemptuous of us. Are his parents members of the Young Communist League? I don't understand what's going on. And whatever it is, it doesn't feel good to be on the receiving end of it. So if you ask me what characteristics I would want in somebody to be your partner, I would want you to respect what they've done with their life already, not what their dreams might be of becoming a successful rock musician, which the odds are stacked against him. Maybe he will. I hope for your sake and his that he does. It's not a likely outcome. I would like somebody who's become independent, who lives apart from his family as you do, and is responsible for a lot of their own self-care as you are. You're taking practically no money from us anymore, and you have a job even though you're going to college. I find you admirable. I don't find how he sponges off his parents all the time admirable. And I don't know if you consider him admirable if you're betting on what his potential might be. I don't want you to have to bet on somebody's potential. I want the actuality of what somebody is to be real already if you're to be serious with them. And I would like them, obviously, to adore you, think you're wonderful, and show that with a million gestures and lots of words. And I don't see any of that coming from him. He seems like a sponge who soaks you up and gives little or nothing in return. Okay, I'm finished. I said what I had to say. Oh, one last thing. If you ever separated from him, I would be relieved. But you're not put on earth to please me. You have to live according to the dictates of your own inner voice. So I'm done. If you want to say something, I'll listen. If you don't want to say anything, that's fine too. And she said, I have nothing to say. I said, fine, finish with your clothes, and I'll look forward to seeing you again next week. She never discussed what I had said to her, not once. But 2 months later, she separated from him and she went to live with some girlfriends, and it was the end of her relationship with him. And maybe I put the bee in her bonnet. Maybe I was only touching on things that were starting to grow in her anyhow and just confirming some perception she had. But then we fast forward to the next chapter. She lived with girlfriends, and then since she had grown up a lot with the son of my best friend at that time, Marty Berkowitz, with his son Cliff. Cliff was already what he's 3 years older than she is. So at the time she was in she was about 20, he was 23. He had quit college. Also, where I don't know where he got his training, but the love of his life was he wanted to be in radio. Radio was very hot back then. Television was hot, radio was hot. Radio was still an important medium. The internet had not been invented yet. uh, he wanted to climb the ladder. He wanted to be a disc jockey. He wanted then maybe to have his own Sirius program. He wanted to be station manager, and eventually he wanted to own a radio station. And he had already gotten hired as a disc jockey, and he had a big following. He was doing very well. He was at a station in San Diego, but they were seeing a lot of each other and they became lovers. And he suggested that she transfer from Cal State LA to Cal State San Diego, and that she moved down and lived with him in his apartment because he had a nice apartment on his salary, and finish school there. And she proceeded to do that. They became a number and they became lovers, and she changed her major. She saw that art was lovely to study, but it wasn't going to lead her anywhere practical, and she decided that she was going to be a school teacher. So she switched over to an education major, and with our blessing, and she asked us, "Do we think?" I said, "Yeah, certainly seems like a reasonable career choice for you. You used to love being a teacher when you were a kid. That's the thing, that was your favorite play. Maybe this will work for you now." And on she went. Uh, and they continued to live together, and she graduated. But before she graduated, in order to get her teaching credential in the second of her 2 years there, she had to be a part-time practice teacher in the San Diego school system. And then she got into an existential crisis. She went to teach kindergarten in an inner city school in the San Diego school district. Uh, she was, what was she doing? She was an assistant teacher with a master teacher who was teaching her how to teach and evaluating her and supervising her. And when she would come for the weekend occasionally, sometimes with Cliff, who would visit with his parents and with us, and sometimes alone, she would start complaining. It was stultifying. There was no creativity. It was as if she was back in kindergarten here with "here is the way you draw a tree." The curriculum is rigid, it's unpleasant, it's not fit for children, and leaves no room for any kind of joy or spontaneity. She hated what she was asked to do. She hated how the kids were disciplined and what they were being disciplined for. And she got very depressed. She said, I don't even know if I can finish the whole year of student teaching. I don't know. I just hate driving there. I drive slower and slower as I get closer and closer to the school. It feels like I'm going into jail. It's like the teacher is the warden, and the pupils and I are the inmates in the institution. She said, but I don't know what else I could do. I said, you have no other thoughts about what to do with your life? She said, no. I said, she asked me, do you have any thoughts about what I could do with your life? I said, not at the moment, but we'll talk. I said, do you think you could grit your teeth? I don't want you to not graduate. You need to at least complete practice teaching in order to get your degree. Could you grit your teeth and drag yourself through it, even if you hated every moment of it? Maybe you could just be there while you're observing and have an out of body experience and go daydreaming about things that have nothing to do with teaching. Maybe it's okay if you get a lousy evaluation as long as you get credit for having completed the practice teaching. That's all that's necessary. Could you be a soldier and just soldier through? She said, yeah, I could do it. Gonna have a shitty year. I said, I'm sorry. I'll wish for you that this is the only shitty year of your life from now until when you die. But all right, you're doomed to have a shitty year. When she came back next, I said, well, I have an idea for you. I said, you had another talent while you were a teenager. Outside of your bedroom door, there was a little platform there, a little kind of patio outside the door. And you used to be the sick plant lady. Every time we had a plant that was dying, and we all have black thumbs in this family, we would give you the plant. You would figure out whether it needed fertilizer, less water, more sunlight, less sunlight. You would do some research. You would read up on the plant and see what's optimal for you. You would test the damn chemicals in the soil. You would take a soil sample to the nursery and have them test the soil for you and figure out what additives needed to be put in the pot for the plant. And you were magnificent. You got all kinds of plants that looked like they were dead to blossom again. And so the word went out in the neighborhood, and all kinds of people in the neighborhood were bringing you their dying plants to resuscitate. You did it. Have you ever thought of becoming a landscape architect? She says, what's a landscape architect? I said, that's a person who knows how to make beauty. They know everything about plants, grasses, irrigation, fertilization, everything having to do with spaces and making spaces beautiful with growing things. They may design somebody's backyard. They may only consult on what the window boxes should be on new construction. It could be a small project or a huge project. It could be a huge public space, a huge Griffith Park. Griffith Park has landscape architects working on what Griffith Park should look like and whether a new grove of certain somethings would look better there rather than what's there at the present time. So they work in large scale down to small scale. And you can get licensed. It can be your career, and you can be in practice for yourself, or you can go to work for the city or the county, or you can go to work for a landscape architect's firm and be a staff member of the firm. You have career flexibility. And I do not know where there are training programs that will train you to get the certificate you need to get licensed in this state. I do know that UCLA Extension, for instance, and probably San Diego Extension has plans you can take on garden design, on garden nutrition. They have pieces of the curriculum, but then I don't think they give a certificate that turns into a license. Find out where you can get a certificate that turns into a license. So she did research. There were two programs. Cal Poly Pomona was one of the two. a master's degree program, and UC Berkeley also had a master's degree program. Those were the only two academic institutions that gave you a certificate that was accepted by the Bureau of Landscape Architecture, the state government of California that licenses landscape architects. So she said to Cliff, how can we work this out? I think I want to go to Cal Poly Pomona. And he said, let me see what I can do. I'll see if I can get hired by another radio station at reasonable wages, and I'll move where I work so you don't have a horrible commute. And he got hired in Claremont on a radio station. So off they went to Claremont, and she was accepted at Cal Poly Pomona. And she was really happy. And to this day, she remains a licensed landscape architect. And her second career fits her very, very well. So that was a way I was able to facilitate an important change. And I'll tell one more story. They were now living in Claremont, and they decided that they were both on a path towards creating their adulthoods well, and it was time to get married. They were thinking maybe they'll start a family in the near future, so it was time to have a wedding and not just live together. And that was the next step. Uh, their father lived in a very large, appealing condo in Culver City, and that place had a huge recreation room that could be reserved by the residents. So he saved it, and that's where their wedding was held. But things started to get bad because I was attached to Amy. My relationship with what had been my best friend started to get increasingly problematic. Uh, I'll tell a little side story. He was like a brother in some ways, but he was also like a brother in very bad ways. It was clear that he envied me. It was clear that he was resentful of me sometimes. And I had to put up, just as I had with my middle sister, with a lot of mean teasing from him, that he would then pull back and say, you know, I should know that he loves me and he's only kidding. And there was enough about my relationship with him. The backpacking episodes, he came to teach at CSPP, and I valued him. He helped me with some governance work that was going on in APA, and I valued him for that. There were many things that were good about our relationship, so I put up with the bullshit. One of the things that was problematic was he thought his son had not made a good choice of partner, that she was not doting enough on him. She was too into her own career. She was too much an emancipated woman. She was not going to be a traditional wife. He worried about how good she was taking care of Cliff's needs. And he was now on his third wife, and we loved his second wife, who he divorced, and we lost her. And we were not very respectful. He had a stepson that he lived with for the 8 years of that marriage. And when she left, he wanted nothing further to do with the stepson. He banished the stepson from his life, and that felt very cruel because the kid was with him partly because he had a father who had no interest and abandoned him. And he took to Marty and was very attached to Marty. And Marty's own twisted idea, he didn't want anything to do with him anymore if he wanted nothing further to do with the wife. And this was somebody who'd come to his life temporarily and goodbye, just like his wife should be goodbye, so the boy should be goodbye. When the kid was grown up, I think Billy was about 14 or 15 then. When Billy was 22 and out of college, he tried to contact Marty again to see if Marty's ideas about him had changed. And Marty rejected him all over again, told him to leave him alone and stop stalking him. So that did not impress me. I was getting increasingly irritated. I also didn't like his third wife very much. She seemed snooty and unpleasant and very competitive with Hermine. She asked Hermine what color dress Hermine was going to wear Amy's wedding, and she said, I think I'm going to get a mauve dress. And so she said, that's a good idea. I'm going to get one too. And promptly went and got a dress of the same color. And that pissed Hermine off. And Hermine went and got a different dress so she could show up with a different dress. She didn't want that kind of symbiosis with the woman we didn't like that much. And so it got dicey. And uh, not only, uh, uh, let's see, on occasion, Marty would ask his son to come over and visit them without Amy. He wanted his son to himself, and he didn't want to have to share her with her oncoming wife. And one night, they were over making wedding plans, and Marty didn't like the plans that Amy and Cliff were making together. And he told Cliff, tell her to shut up, that you're going to decide that right in front of Amy. And he said to Amy, he's the man and he gets to make the final decisions about what your wedding is going to consist of. And Amy started crying and she left. She just didn't want to stick around anymore. She took the card and told Cliff he's going to have to find a way to get home by himself. And then she called us crying. And I said, oh my God, all this is going. And we're only 2 weeks now from the wedding, and all this is happening. I got to try and see if I could find some way to fix this. So I promised Amy, she said, I don't want to be present with him anymore. I hope I never see him again. I said, let me see if I can negotiate something between the two of you to live in at least some kind of quiet peace with each other. And I went with Amy to him, and I repeated what I had heard had gone on the last time she was there, and he had hurt her very badly. And he started to yell at me. She deserved it. She said she was out of place. You haven't raised her properly, and I had to step in and do something with her. And I left very unsatisfied, and I just left him a message as I was leaving. I don't know when and under what circumstances we can meet. I'll see you at the wedding. We will be pleasant, and I will welcome you. I'll give you a hug because we're there for the wedding, but I don't know if I want to socialize and spend time with you anymore. And that was the breach that continued for the rest of his life. I continued to see him occasionally at ceremonial times because he would show up for affairs of the blended families. But I would say hello, I'd have some conversation with him, but Hermine and I never sought his company or the company of the two, him and his present wife, ever again. And he lived for about 25 more years before he died. So we were alienated from him for 25 years. That was very painful. That came with my attachment to Amy. And my final thing, how wonderful Thanksgiving is coming. Soon after the marriage took place, and everybody was civil. It was quiet and subdued. And we did the best we could, and everybody was civil, and we got through the wedding. But they're there as a married couple in Claremont, and Thanksgiving was coming. They were about 29, 30. Amy was about 30 then, 29, 30. And the string is being broken. I was crying. Yeah, 2 days ago, I was crying because we have had 51 consecutive Thanksgivings since Hermine and I have been together. We have been the Thanksgiving home. The first year, we were just a courting couple who was going to have Thanksgiving together. My children from my first marriage came for part of it because they also went off to have Thanksgiving with their mother. And her children were with us for part of the time and were with their father part of the time. In addition, we had many, many other people. We had people who had been my friends, people who had been her friends. We were happy to be the host. We had some neighbors in the neighborhood we lived with who came for our Thanksgiving. I think there were about 30 people there at the first Thanksgiving we had. And it went on from there with changing numbers every year. But the string was unbroken until just this past week. And for the first time, we're not going to have Thanksgiving here. But midway through that, when Amy was 30, I called her and I told her the following. Her elderly great aunt Edith, my mother's aunt, who lived in Long Beach, and now who had been a widow for a year. Her husband had died. She was 82. He was 86 when he died. She had gone blind. She had had a certain surge of bleeding macular degeneration, and she was blind. She could no longer drive. She was having a hell of a time getting neighbors to market for her, and she was down there in Seal Beach all by herself. And I said, I don't want her to miss Thanksgiving. She's been with us every year, and her husband used to come too. And when the two of them got too old to drive, I always drove down and retrieved them and brought them here. And now she's all alone. I have to go get her. And I'm afraid the traffic is going to be terrible. It's an hour drive to get down and get her and bring her back. So I'm calling you. I made an estimate. Could we have Thanksgiving dinner at 3 o'clock in the afternoon instead of 5 o'clock in the afternoon? Because I think I'm not going to have as big traffic problems going both ways. And I'm already giving up 4 hours. Now, planning is going to take me an hour to get there, an hour to retrieve her, and then early in the evening, an hour to turn around and take her back again, and then an hour to come home. So she's not out too late. And there's silence. I'm not hearing anything. I said, Amy, did you hear me? She said, yeah, I heard you. I said, well, is there a problem about your coming at 3 o'clock? I assume you and Cliff can come anytime. She said, I've not had the courage to tell you this. I should have called you days ago. She said, Cliff and I are not coming this year. I said, oh? She said, well, we're a married couple and we're networked with several other married couples, some of whom have children now. And we all decided we're here in Claremont. We're going to have a potluck Thanksgiving. Each of the family is bringing one of the dishes for the meal, and we're going to stay here in Claremont. We're not going to come and be with you. And I wanted to kill her. How the hell can she abandon us this way? I'm not ready to have Thanksgiving without her and her husband there. What the hell? But I was a good father and said good words. I said, I am proud of you. I'm sorry it was hard to tell us. Yes, it does hurt to hear that you won't be there. You will be missed. And she said, well, you can come for pumpkin pie maybe in the middle of the evening. I said, no, we're going to be really tired from hosting this. We are every year. And I don't think mom and I or your sister want to drive later into the evening all the way to Claremont and then turn around after having some pumpkin pie and a little conversation and come back. It'll be probably close to midnight by the time we get home. And we're going to be exhausted. So we'll just not be together. Maybe some other year we'll all be together at Thanksgiving again. But you're doing the right thing. You're the head of the beginnings of a new family. You as a couple are already a new family, and you're thinking of having children, so there will be more in your little family. And yes, you start needing to create various rituals. I don't know what you're planning on doing at Passover or at Christmas. You figure out what the rituals of your family need to be. You no longer are obligated to be a child in the rituals we have already organized and expected you to attend. Please do not have any guilt about it. I celebrate you and set you free. Okay, on that note, pre-Thanksgiving note, I think I will stop. I'm not even finished with Amy yet. All right. I must say, I'll make a final comment. At very critical moments, I think I was a very good father to Amy. The things I'm telling you about, I feel quite proud of. Some things my wife and I invented together, some things just occurred to me. But I think she got a very good upbringing, and she is a very decent and productive and worthwhile human being. And I'll take some of the credit for creating. She became what she needed to become, but I made sure the conditions were favorable for her to realize that. And I can feel some pride in all of that. And now I'll open the conversation.
Arthur, how did Amy traverse between her two fathers? She had two fathers, you
That,
and her
yeah,
biological one. How
yeah.
did that work?
Oh, let me make a note. That's part of my story for next time. The complications of a relationship between two fathers and
Oh,
what that
okay.
led to.
Mhm.
I'm making a note right now. The answer is ugh.
Sure.
Amy and the two father challenge. Okay. I'll do a little anticipation.
To
She
be
and
continued.
yeah,
Yeah.
she and Cliff, after living in Claremont for a while, worked their way up the coast and are currently living near him in Eureka, California.
Hmm.
So that was the ultimate outcome, full of complexities, and I will describe that next week.
Okay.
I
Other
have a
things.
little, I have a little meta observation. I don't know. I remember when in your grad school class, you had us watch Two for the Road.
Yes.
It was a movie about, and you wanted us to watch it as a way to kind of understand what it takes to maybe sometimes keep a marriage together. And
Yes.
just kind of your story across the whole time here, it kind of gives it, I think it's very useful for people to see, how complicated life can be and what it takes to kind of live through families, and do it the best you can.
Uh, every time Hermine talks about her first marriage and her divorce, she often says, I was so tired after that. I think I'm still tired from that.
A lot.
I'm glad she's not so tired from living with me.
Well, maybe she just didn't tell you.
No, she's not tired. She's frequently anxiety ridden because she doesn't know what I'm going to do next.
Yeah.
I'm not
Arthur,
predictable.
I don't know if well, I'm sure you remember that in the professional roles class that you taught, we had supervisees that
Yes, I
were,
remember.
lower class men from CSBP.
Yeah, we
And
wanted
so,
you to start practicing being the wise professional who is responsible for the younger members coming into the profession.
so I had a supervisee who, did become a very good friend of mine. But during that year and the year after, he was going through a very kind of rough time. And I think I asked you for a referral, and it was Marty. And
Yes,
he was very, and I think Marty did a very good job with him, and he was very
yes.
fond of him. So I
Marty
just
was
wanted to let
capable
you know
of
that.
doing really, really special and good things, as
Yes.
well as being terrible, just terrible.
So that's just a footnote.
Yes. Anything else for today?
I got out of being a supervisee. I just I thought to myself, I was very busy. And so back when I was there, you had to be put into a pool for the whole classes. So they said, what were your areas of interest? And I said, CBT and the elderly. No one picked me.
Uh, So I think for next week, we're going to take Friday off.
All right,
We
we'll
were
have a
talking.
hiatus for the Thanksgiving
Yeah,
weekend.
yeah.
Yes.
All right. Sounds good to me.
Thanks, guys. I will see
Okay.
you then.
Have a
See
nice
ya.
Bye.
holiday.
I
Bye.
will.
Bye, guys.